Hello and welcome to Between the Ropes TV. Thank you for joining us on our live tonight. I'm joined by Josh. Josh, how are you doing?
I'm good, mate. I'm glad to have you back. It was a stressful week last week, but I hope it all went
Tell
well.
me about it. Tell me about it. I've managed to move everything but myself and Aaron Harper. Hopefully we'll be actually living there very, very soon. But nevertheless, all the stuff's there. Now let's get straight into this. We've got a lot to catch up with over the weekend, haven't we, Josh? We've got the Chisora fight card. We've got the fight card that happened in America with Mark Magsayo against Rey Vargas for the World Championship at featherweight. We've got Eddie Hearn and a bit of a rift with Lawrence Okolie to talk about, and a fight that's just being potentially mooted as being done. And we'll go into that later. Plus, we've got the BT card coming up at the weekend. But before we crack on and all that, Josh, take me through the Chisora card, starting with the main event. How did you see that fight going?
Well, I did do a reaction to it, and I watched it back. Well, watched the highlights back, and I stand by what I said. I thought Chisora definitely won it for me. I scored it, and I did say on our video, I scored it 116-112 on Saturday night. I think possibly I would change the second round and give it to Pulev. So, maybe 115-113. But definitely for Derek Chisora. I just thought that, the game plan, and it was great to see Don Charles back in the corner.
Yeah, because they've got sorry to cut you off there, but they've got a really good, strong relationship. And it was interesting when you went to Dave Caldwell, you thought maybe you could never go back to Don Charles, but he has done with some success, hasn't he?
Well, really, it's probably his biggest career win. You obviously have the Matchroom or just general critics and negativity on Twitter that were like, oh, well, Pulev's 41. But, regardless, let's not forget he was challenging Anthony Joshua, and it took Joshua 9 rounds to get him out of there. Yeah. So he's still a good top 15. And I agree with Eddie Hearn, possibly top 10 heavyweight. So it's probably Chisora's biggest win. And he called it himself. He went home to Don Charles. And so I was happy with that. Yeah, 115, 113 is probably what I would go for it in hindsight. But it was just the game plan from the start. It was his typical Derek Chisora, aggressive, went to the body well. I mean, halfway through the first round, Pulev's ribs were marked up a treat. I think it just negated what Pulev was trying to do. Pulev did look quite calm, and he seemed like he was handling the atmosphere because, we know the atmosphere that a Chisora fight brings in terms of the fans backing him.
Yeah.
But after the fourth, maybe fifth round, Pulev didn't look calm. All of a sudden, he was like a fish out of water. And I think, I wouldn't say the occasion or the atmosphere got to him, but I just think, as his game plan wasn't working, mixed with the fans, it was just the perfect storm of, it just wasn't a good night for him. But he gave a good account of himself. I mean, at top level, you'd have to say it's probably the end for Pulev now, but there'll be a payday for, I would imagine, with DAZN now to, be a gatekeeper and, who knows, in the next 12 months fight some of their...
For Pulev? Is that for Pulev?
Yeah. As in, like...
Because I would kind of jump in and we'll come to it. You're talking about gatekeepers there. And Chisora's... He's sort of like the Gabe Rosado of heavyweights. You think he's done and he comes back with a win. You talked about him having a great win, Pulev. But I like his win against David Price. I like his wins against Carlos Takam as well. 2 stoppage wins. Yeah. But gatekeeper, that's interesting. We're talking about that bracket for Pulev. Do you think Chisora's out of that gatekeeper bracket, or do you still think he is one, potentially, when you're talking about who he could be put in with next?
I think with Derek Chisora, it's very tough, isn't it? And, there's a few of you in the comment section. So, guys, join us. Let us know what you think. But for me, for Chisora, he's stuck. He's not quite a gatekeeper for me. And I think Saturday night proves that. But he's definitely not in the top 10 heavyweights in the world. For me, he's almost in a class of his own because, he's beaten a Spilka, he's beaten a Takam, beaten a David Price. So those fringe world guys he beats, and I think he comfortably beats. But as soon, he's got 12 losses for a reason, hasn't he? As soon as he steps up into that top 10, he's firmly, well, not firmly because some of the decisions were close, but, he loses, doesn't he? He's not quite good enough. So, I don't know, do you say he's firmly the 11th best heavyweight in the world if you want to number it?
I mean, he's been unlucky in some of his decisions, hasn't he? The
Definitely.
Helenius one, some people gave him the Usyk fight. I didn't give him the Usyk fight, but it's when you sort of look at where Chisora could possibly go, he's at a stage of his career where he's not going to get a world title shot. So the next best option is a lucrative fight. So what lucrative fights, Josh, do you think are out there for him?
Well, he obviously mentioned Deontay Wilder in his post-fight. Now, I'm a massive Derek Chisora fan. I truly, truly am. But I don't want to see him fight Deontay Wilder. You know, if he fights Deontay Wilder, I worry that he's going to get seriously hurt. You know, it was a nice scene on Saturday. For his family were at ringside. It was quite a nice scene. I do not want to see him in with Deontay Wilder. Obviously, for this fight, the Adam Kovnacki fight was nearly made.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be a fight. But for me personally, my first choice, I'd quite like to see him try and go down avenging losses route. You know, that was for a WBA international title on Saturday. So, you know, once the rankings are updated, you know, I'd like to see him take, if he says he's got 2 more, I'd like to see him have an easier fight. So, you know, we've mentioned him a few times, but since he's blagged that top 10 ranking, you know, someone like Lucas Brown, I'd class that as a fair fight, both aging warriors type thing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind seeing it. Ranking wise would probably make sense. But I really like the Helenius fight as well. I've called for it on our social media pages. You know, Helenius well ranked with the WBA. He may not want to risk that position, but he's not doing a lot else since his 2 wins over Kovnacki. So I'd quite like that fight. I don't know about yourself.
Okay, Imran, how are you doing, my friend? Good friend of the show. Imran, it's good to have you watching us tonight. And thanks very much for your comment. I was going to throw a name at you. You're talking about avenging losses and things like that. Scott, my friend, how are you doing?
You should be joining on here with us, not dropping comments in the section. And he has made a great point there. In fairness,
I can't.
I do worry about the Deontay Wilder fight.
Yeah, I can't dispute that. I think if he goes in with somebody like Deontay Wilder, who I think people are writing off far too quickly and easily, Deontay Wilder is still, in my opinion, the most deadliest heavyweight on the planet. We have to say, you go in with Deontay Wilder, he's got more than a puncher's chance of getting you out of there. I see Imran's mentioned Andy Ruiz. That's a good fight. The name I was going to put to you, Josh, was Dillian White, because you mentioned about avenging losses. Dillian White, that would sell. Imagine a press conference again. Andy Ruiz, for me, I think we need to see how good he looks in another fight, because he didn't look great in his last fight, did he? He had all that weight loss. He didn't look too great, in his last fight, but he's got skills to cause Chisora problems. He's got that speed. Mickey C, how you doing, mate?
Good to have you back, mate. We're all good.
Yes.
We're just talking of potential opponents for Derek Chisora, Michael, if you've got one, mate.
Yeah. I think the one thing about Chisora is he's put his name back in that mix. He's shown that he's still got appetite for a fight. But I do worry that for him getting caught clean off Pulev, the warning signs, if weren't already there, have been magnified for me. I would struggle to have any sort of put any weight behind putting him in with a Deontay Wilder. That's why I like the Andy Ruiz fight. Although Andy Ruiz, I mean, the heavyweights, they hit you clean, you're going to go. But the way he was getting hit cleanly and often, for me, from what I understand from Pulev, I wouldn't want to see him anywhere near like a Wilder. A Dillian White fight financially makes sense for both guys. That's where I would see for that one. But for the rest of the card, tell me your thoughts on a couple of fighters who I think are at the same level in their career. They're both around the 11-0, 13-0 mark, respectively. That's Kevin Ajako and Fabio Wardley. I mean, what was your view of those fighters? Has it changed, or is it still the same since before the fight on Saturday?
Well, Fabio Wardley, you can't really have your opinion changed, sadly, because he was very unlucky. You know, Kingsley Abay, obviously I said about it in our preview. He gave, you know, Jared Anderson, he asked questions of him and it wasn't the easiest fight. I know you're a fan of Anderson, aren't you, mate?
Oh, yeah, big fan, yeah.
But he was unlucky. The opponent dropped out at 24 hours. So the biggest thing we actually learned about Fabio Wardley was the sort of mental toughness in terms of he didn't let it bother him. He still went in there. He didn't just go gung-ho and try to take anybody's head off. He thought about it properly and got him out of there when he was ready. And, you know, massive respect to Chris Healy for getting off the sofa because, you know, with the greatest respects to him, clearly that was what had happened. And he took the fight, fair play. And he did what he probably could, to be fair. But so I feel sorry for Fabio Wardley. I think for Fabio Wardley now, the key is that he gets that Nathan Gorman fight next. He's 14-0, 13 straight stoppage wins. Get him the Gorman fight, get him a big fight. He needs that. As for Kevin Ajago, I was very, very impressed with him. I've watched a couple of his fights, but you know, he's not one of these. I've got to be honest that I've watched all of his fights. He handled the move down to 154 very, very well. And I was impressed with that. But I think he got sloppy in the 7th. And he's almost like he's such a classy operator that almost hindered him. It was like he was winning it too comfortably. I thought he did a better job on him than Anthony Fowler did on Masiek. Obviously, we saw Anthony Fowler fight him not too long ago. But yeah, I think, you know, we're going to see more of both, aren't we? I think that's the key.
I think so. Michael C says, I think Andy Ruiz Jr., Dillian White again. That's no one that's elite or he's getting embarrassed. Him is in Chisora and Pulev box over 500 rounds in their career. Mental stat that. Yep, I agree with you, Mickey. And that's what the point I was making about Chisora. For me, he's firmly a gatekeeper, and I can't see him escaping that. Like I said before, he's like the Gabe Rosado of the heavyweight division. And that's my worry for him. 500 rounds at heavyweight is a lot of punishment. There's a lot of punishment, and Chisora takes punishment. I think as he's got older, his style's adapted a little bit more. But he's looking sluggish, and he's right. He's there for the taking. That's why I agree with Mickey. You don't put him in with anyone elite. That temptation to put him in a big swan song stadium fight to finish his career. You could damage him. You could really damage him. This is the heavyweight division.
But the flip side of that is, firstly, evening, Joel. Great to have you back in the chat, mate.
How are we doing, Joel? How are you doing?
But sorry, Ray, with just what you said, I get what you're saying, and I agree. That's why I don't want to see him in with Wilder, to be totally honest. Don't get me wrong. I think if you can get past Wilder's sort of right hand and get on Wilder's chest, I genuinely think he beats Deontay Wilder. But if he gets caught on the way in, Wilder's boxing ability is so limited that he's just not going to do it.
It is, but there is a certain Chisora style is pretty much. It's not like he's cute on the way coming in. He's not like an Andy Ruiz who can tuck up, use his head movement and his feet. Chisora just walks forward, and that plays into Deontay Wilder's hands because as poor as Deontay Wilder is, he can create space.
Yeah, but he was cuter on Saturday night. He was bobbing and weaving on his way in. And certainly the first 4 rounds, bar odd little flashes of success from Pulev.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, this is the issue. Chisora couldn't keep it up for 12 rounds. You know, he's 38. But he was bobbing and weaving, and he was caused Pulev problems, and Pulev can box. So I'm not being an advocate of the Wilder fight. I don't want to see him in there, but I do think he gives him a tough work. And this is the thing with what I was just going to say. If he's going from potentially, you know, very high 6-figure, 7-figure paydays for his last however many fights on the bounce, I totally agree with Michael. It'll be about the payday. He's openly said, you know, he said in his post-fight, where's Conor Benn? You know, you're giving Conor Benn all this money, giving Anthony Joshua all this money. I'm sick of eating fish and chips. I want a bit of caviar now. Obviously, Derek Chisora's earned well through his career, but if it say he's just earned, say 7 figures, say $1 million, we don't know, but say he's earned $1 million for fighting Pulev, how do you then convince him to go and fight somebody worse than Pulev for, I don't know, say 600 grand, or because he'll always do the gate, he'll always do the, you know, well, not pay-per-view, but subscription numbers now. it's too tough. I don't think you convince him to do it. He deserves the payday.
But
And
the thing is, go on.
No. Well, I was just going to say, and he's just beaten a top 15 heavyweight. So why would you take a step back now?
But Andrew Ruiz and Dillian White aren't a step back from Pulev, in my opinion. They're probably.
But
although
is it not?
Dillian,
Andy Ruiz laboured to a Chris Arreola win a year ago.
Yeah.
We'll see what he's got against Arreola.
Still is the guy that beat Anthony Joshua. Still, he beat Anthony
3 years
Joshua.
Ago.
Yeah, it still we had COVID for 2 years. And he beat Anthony Joshua. It wasn't like he laboured to beat Anthony Joshua. He destroyed Joshua. And that's the reason why, in my opinion, Anthony Joshua psychologically is not being the same. So that fight, in my opinion, it just needs a good performance from Andy Ruiz to sell that fight. He's a better fighter than Pulev. And it's a less dangerous fight than a Wilder fight. But yeah, that's you guys in the comments. You chip in. You tell us who you want to see Chisora in next. You tell us if you side with me, you think I'm wrong. You side with Josh, or you think Josh's wrong. You guys tell us.
Whoa. All right. Firstly, Michael's coming with, I think Wilder would do some serious damage. Getting caught off a 41-year-old, so anyone with a decent level would seriously damage him. I totally agree. I do not want to see, just for the record, I do not want to see Derek Chisora fight Deontay Wilder. I do.
Josh wants to see that fight.
I just think that there is a potential for him to cause some damage. Joel's back. Chisora will be better fighting an up-and-comer. Joel, it's an interesting approach, and it's one we could see. It certainly fits that gatekeeper profile.
Yeah.
Which up-and-comer? Because personally, I'd love to see. I think he'd give Daniel Dubois a tough night, and I think he'd be Daniel Dubois' toughest fight. I'm not saying he'd win, but we'd learn a lot about Daniel Dubois. In all fairness, I think on that fight, is that fair, Ray?
Yeah, I think he does. I think he beats the likes of Gorman, Wardley, Adelaide. I think he beats all those guys. And as you were saying there about can he get motivated for those fights, the answer is no. He beats them. They have a lot. He has a lot of experience, and these kids coming through can't buy that experience. Hughie Fury might be slightly different, but I think he asks a lot of questions of Hughie Fury. I think he puts too much pressure on Hughie Fury, who, remember, isn't exactly a puncher for a heavyweight. So that's what I see on that. And I agree with what Imran's saying here.
I agree also.
Out. But getting back to my point about Kevin Jarko, I wanted to make a point. You said that he seemed as though he was taking his foot off the gas in certain rounds. I think he reminds me a little bit of Billy Joe Saunders, where because he's probably a lot better than who he's getting matched at, he switches off, he gets a bit bored. They probably moved him down the weight class, not just because he's not really a banger, is he? Really, he's a skillful operator. Tricks very slick. They've probably done that to try and motivate him, but the point I'm making is what challenges are out there for him, because interestingly enough, if he's going to stick around for that, he's in the mix with the likes of a big division with Troy Williamson, Kieran Conway, JJ Metcalf, Laragia from Spain. Can you see him in that mix? Do you think he's ready for those guys, or do you think actually he's about 2 or 3 fights away?
No, I think he's 1 fight away. He's 12-0 now. I think I talked in our reaction about how he's answered a lot of questions about himself being at 154, done the 10 rounds, so he knows he's got that championship distance with him. He looked
great on the scales, I must say, Josh, didn't he?
He looked great on the scales, great in the fight, did the 10 rounds pretty comfortably. He talked about he wants to go back to Belfast, fight at the Odyssey Arena, and he wants, obviously, Spike O'Sullivan. Now, that for me would be, Spike O'Sullivan's not in the best of forms, but I think if you can make light middle or super welter, whichever you want to call it, I think he's probably a good last fight at that sort of level before he jumps in with I'd love to see the La Haraja fight. I think that, again, that's a fight that would probably make sense for DAZN as well as, Matchroom as well. And then, I talked about, I think it's too early, but if he went Spike O'Sullivan, made a good win, if you then say beat La Haraja in good fashion, we had him on the other week. I'd love a Troy Williamson fight if Troy's still at that sort of British level. But I think if those two, I think he'd then be more than ready for a British title shot. Whoever that came up against, or whether it was even a JJ Metcalf.
Yeah,
again, that makes sense.
He's Irish, and so he probably won't get that shot, but he could get a shot at the European.
He's
The
not
Commonwealth.
Northern, so yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry, stand corrected. There's me thinking he's from Dublin, from Belfast. So yeah, he could get that British title shot. Yeah, I don't think he's ready for the likes of Troy yet. I still think there's a gap between him going in for the likes of Troy. A fight for me, if he does come back, would have been against Cheeseman. It would have been a good comeback fight for Cheeseman. I wouldn't put him in with the likes of Troy yet. But yeah, I do like what
he's two fights shy of someone like Troy.
And
the right to opponents.
O'Sullivan's a good name on his record, and I think that's what he's lacking at the minute, names. But he's building good experience against some of these Eastern European opponents that he can get rounds from. But moving on to the States then, I don't know whether you guys in the chat, guys, there's a few here now in the comments and in the chat, so give us a quick like. We're really good. It helps us with the algorithm and stuff, so give us a quick like while you're there. That would be much appreciated. But I wanted to turn our attention to
Ray, sorry, Ray, just before we move on, this will be back on Chisora. We've got Joel. He'd like to see him fight Anderson. Now, I know you're a big fan of Anderson, as we've already said, and Chisora would give him a big learning fight and get to learn how good Anderson is. Dubois agreeing with us on Dubois. I think, Joel, the only issue with a potential Jared Anderson fight would be selling it in the UK. Chisora is a name in the UK only, as much as we're fans of him, well, I am. I don't think it sells stateside, does it?
Probably not, because I don't think Chisora is a huge name in the in America. But this is the problem. I can see where Joe's coming from, because the idea of the zone is to bring us big global fights. And the problem that, me and you have had loads of discussions, Joel, Josh, where we basically said, and I've had these discussions with Joel as well over Facebook. The problem with the zone is he's stuck between two markets. He's trying to please the American audience and he's trying to please the British audience. So he needs, in my opinion, to start making these crossover fights. That would be an ideal one to make, because that probably would have potential. Is it a massive fight that would sell at this minute? No, but it could be built into one if Hearn played his cards right.
Well, it could, if you think it. Say you got him on the same card. I don't know, in September, October time. October, I suppose, with it being July. If you got him on the same card, and then it builds to a nice early next year headline act, doesn't it? So I do like the fight, and I agree with Michael as well. He'd give Joe Joyce a great night, and again, probably be Joe Joyce's toughest fight yet.
Yeah, it would definitely be Joe Joyce's. And he's got enough experience to cope with Joe Joyce's ramrod jab. We talk about how good Joyce's chin is. Chisora is really good at countering the jab and coming in on the inside and throwing absolutely wild overhand lefts and overhand rights, which I can imagine could go over the top of that jab. For me, that's a points win. It's got points win written all over it. You couldn't call it at this stage. Could Joyce keep him off with that jab? But it's Chisora got too much use and experience to rough him up on the inside. Joe Joyce is another one that's slow, plodding. Hasn't looked great in his last two performances, in my opinion. He's won them stoppages, but he's not looked too good, so that'd be an interesting one. But yeah, I really want to touch on this next fight, guys. Mark Magsayo and Rey Vargas. That was a really interesting fight, because Mark Magsayo had that big win, won the WBC featherweight title when he beat Gary Russell Jr. And then he was fighting against Rey Vargas, a really tall featherweight, about 4 inches taller than Mark Magsayo. Did you catch any glimpses of that fight, Josh?
Yeah, I saw it, and I don't know. It's another split decision, isn't it? Obviously, that's the same. We saw Magsayo win the WBC featherweight belt, didn't we? On a split decision over, depending on who you speak to, potentially one-handed Gary Russell Jr. And it was a good fight. Obviously, in fair play to Vargas, two-weight world champion. We had to get up off the floor off the ninth.
In the ninth round, yeah.
Yeah, to make it happen. So, for me, it sort of re-blows the featherweight division. back wide open, isn't it? We had a couple of years where it was like Warrington, Santa Cruz's, potentially 1 and 2, Gary Russell's there, but 2 inactive. And now it's like every time we get a new champion, they defend it and we get another new champion. So
yes, yeah, lightweight division.
Yeah, exactly. It's exciting for us. It really is. But I wonder, you in particular, in fairness, around this channel, talked about Magsayo being a little bit one-dimensional in how he goes about his work in the Gary Russell fight. And I think, is it fair to say Vargas exposed that? I kind of feel like it is.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, yeah, I did say that, and although Magsayo won, I thought he only needed that plan A. It was effective in that fight. But I think that was more because Gary Russell Jr. was so inactive. An active Gary Russell Jr. I think puts up a much better performance. But Mark Magsayo was excellent that night. Look, he's a good fighter. He is a good fighter. I just think Rey Vargas is a skilled technician. He boxes beautifully off the back foot and the front foot. He can really mix it. And because he's so tall, he can really keep his distance, and he can stop people getting on the inside to do their work. Because he's so imposing at doing that. He's pleasing on the eye of the judges. He becomes the ring general. He keeps that distance. And it's hard for aggressive fighters like Magsayo to become effective. They just look as though they're throwing a lot of punches, but they're not really landing clean, or they're more importantly, they're not landing more often than what their opponent is. And that's what Vargas is really, really good at doing in fights. It sounds technical, but it really is. It's a skill. It's about making your opponent look as though they're doing a lot, but actually they're not landing. And you're the one landing the cleaner, harder punches. That's what the judges are looking for. And he's that type of fighter. I can see from why people would think it was a close fight, but because maybe I'm slightly biased because I like that style of boxing, to hit and not be hit. I had Vargas winning it by 3. But yeah, I like Rey Vargas. And we had a comment from Imran. Imran's a very knowledgeable guy. Knowledgeable guy. So when he talks, people tend to listen. He says Rey Vargas is good. He is. He's got all the tools. I keep mentioning how he's ridiculously tall. He uses his height. You see a lot of tall fighters. The fight's small, the crouch, or what have you. No, Rey Vargas uses every inch of that height for an advantage. Uses his feet really, really well. And I keep talking about creating the distance because, again, that's the beauty of boxing. You hit, you stay on the outside. If you're the taller fighter, you hit, you don't get hit. And that's how you win. You get to a points decision. I like to see a rematch of that fight. I like to see a rematch. If not, there's some big names in that division, isn't it, Josh? I mean, you still got Josh Warrington there. Lee Wood, I think, is going to be fighting Leo Santa Cruz finally for the WBA because Lee Wood's the regular and Leo Santa Cruz, who knows, the super. That fight's overdue. And don't forget, there's Navarrete, the WBO. Nobody's talking about him anymore. So there's some cracking fights in that division as well, isn't there? And there's that Lara. Boy, we could talk on all night about these featherweights, isn't there?
No, we could. Yeah, that's the thing. Like I said, Lara, Navarrete. I mean, I'm just going to say, I know I've banged on about it every time the featherweight division comes up, but I am sick to death of Leo Santa Cruz being known as the WBA featherweight champion. Or, well, it is super, isn't it, as they call the title. It's ridiculous. The disrespect shown to Lee Wood. And I feel like a hypocrite because I've criticised Daniel Dubois' version. But in fairness, for me, the difference is Lee Wood, in fighting Kanju, he beat what most considered as the number 1 featherweight to win his world title. So that needs sorting. And for me, there's some big, big, big fights to be made at featherweight. I mean, just quickly, guys, in the comment section, who do you think comes out on top at featherweight? If we get the fights we want. In fact, let's have a top 3 because there's a lot of names. So if you're there, chuck us in your top 3 featherweights. Ray, do you need time to think about yours, or have you got a top 3?
No. I think my top 3. I'm gonna start with. I'll just say the 3 of them, and then give me descriptions. I've got to say from my number 1. I'm gonna go with Navarrete. He's been at the weight the longest. He's the most proven at the weight. Although Santa Cruz, for me, is I wouldn't class him as a featherweight yet. I think He's for me. I've always said his best work's been done at super bantamweight, but I'll probably put Navarrete in as me number one at the minute, the WBO champion. I like. I think Josh Warrington's got a great resume. Put him in at number two. I thought Laura gave him kittens, and Laura, in my opinion, beats him again. But Josh Warrington showed different. Josh Warrington's worked at his game. He's not just come forward throwing lots of punches. So plan B, albeit it was against Kiko Martinez. So I think there's a lot more to come from Josh Warrington. For my third one, I'll probably have to say Lee Wood. I think Lee Wood, he's shown that he can box, but he can punch as well. And when he's one of those, he reminds me a lot of Carl Froch in the sense that it's not over until it's over, because he can pull a punch out of nowhere. And I like that in a fighter, particularly in a fighter that can box, because it's shown me that actually if he is getting outboxed, he's got that neutralizer. So those are my top three in the featherweight division.
Do you know what? For once, Ray, I'm going to agree with you completely. And genuinely, for the reasons you've just said, that would be my top three as well. So, guys, if you're in it, hit that like button. It really does help us out to get more of us on there and get the chat going. But no, I agree, Ray. I think, Josh Warrington, people criticise, obviously, with the Lara loss, and obviously we didn't really get to see him bounce back. But I thought he did a great job against an aging Kiko Martinez last time out. It's a shame his jaw went, really, because I'd love to have seen him back more active. But we will see him back, and we'll see what he's got. Ray, Imran agrees. He's not sure if Santa Cruz beats Wood. I don't think he does. I genuinely don't. I
agree with the next bit. I agree with the next bit. I think that's really important to highlight. Santa Cruz is probably the best fighter out of a lot of them. But it's a bit like Gary Russell Jr. At what point, if they're not active, does that catch up on these guys? Santa Cruz, again, when he boxed Frampton the second time round, Frampton couldn't get near him with that jab. I can see him, an active Leo Santa Cruz, doing that to Lee Wood, and Lee Wood not knowing what to do with him. But with Lee Wood being active and Lee Wood being the sharper of the two, I just worry that if Lee Wood catches him, he hurts Leo Santa Cruz, because Lee Wood would jump all over him. And that's the thing. I think that Leo Santa Cruz's style, you need a lot of speed, you need reflexes with that, coming inside, throwing a lot of punches, because he's like a little whirlwind, Leo Santa Cruz. But if you slow down a bit, I mean, you saw what, also, the other thing I'm going to make is styles make fights, and Lee Wood has shown he's very effective against come forward fighters, swarmers I call them, who throw a lot of punches. Look at Kanzu, and he did a job on Kanzu, so I can see him doing a similar job on Leo Santa Cruz. Davey Fulton, my good friend, how are you doing, pal? I agree with you 100%. Lee Woods, I think, will beat Cruz at this point. Had he been back in the time when Frampton fought Cruz and Cruz wins, I
agree.
The reason why I agree with that is because, like I said, Leo Santa Cruz's jab was on point. It was on point.
Sorry to interrupt you, Ray. This is the point for me that Lee Wood gets it. He's got that heart of a champion, hasn't he? We saw it in the Kanju fight. He had to really pull something special out to get that win. And and I know a lot was made of Kanju's inactivity, but for me, he made Kanju look bang average. And then, against Mickey Conlon, again, he showed the heart of a champion. And I really do think that will get you a long, long way. And, with Ben Davis, the game plans are there. He's developing well.
Yeah.
So I think, given the right fights, because he only had 2 fights at the top level, in fairness to Wood, I think give it another 2 fights, another 12 months, we could be talking about Lee Wood being number one. I genuinely believe that. Michael's back. Josh Warrington Wood. Yeah, Shakur Stevenson. I mean, we have spoken about it before, and I think most people are sort of unanimous. Shakur Stevenson's got the potential, hasn't he, Ray, to be, he's like a generational talent,
Yeah.
Big praise in terms of saying a potential Floyd Mayweather, and it is potential at this stage, but that is what we're talking about. He could be that next Seriously,
he's a very, very talented fighter. And the Americans have got a lot of these people that I'm calling special talents. Boots Ennis is another one. I know Imran in the chat's a big fan of his. Joel is as well. I really rate Shakur Stevenson. I'll put him highly in that. He's doing big things at super featherweight, and it won't be long before he's doing big things up at lightweight. So yeah. Just moving on from that slightly. There's been an issue come up on Twitter, hasn't there? So for those guys that are on Twitter, you'll know what we're going to say about this one. But Eddie Hearn and Lawrence Okolie, there's been a bit of a rift between them, hasn't there, Josh? Do you kind of want to give your thoughts on that?
There has been. And so basically, if for those that don't know, Lawrence Okolie received an offer from Sky Sports and BOXXER. In that proposal, they've basically said, we want to position you as being the face of Sky Sports boxing, which is a bit controversial on more than one front. One, Okolie's got a fight left on his deal with Matchroom and DAZN. Two, obviously, in fairness, at cruiserweight, they've got Richard Riakporhe, who I think they've done a good job of rebuilding him. We have said they've done a great job with it. So, it's slightly controversial to, say, actually, we'll just go and get a current world champion when you've got another guy who's undefeated and on the verge, in fairness. Eddie Hearn made some comments saying, I think they've been sending legal letters, but from reading between lines, because he said, I don't want to comment too much on it, but the situation's ongoing. In the meantime, then, Lawrence Okolie has put some controversial tweets out, which I believe have been deleted now, in fairness, saying, how do I force a unification? And sort of insinuating that Eddie Hearn is a slave driver, potentially. And I'm not being funny, but for me, Eddie Hearn, we can slag him off for a lot of things, but I think, we have to give credit where credit's due. And he's done a fantastic job with Lawrence Okolie. I mean, guys, let us know in the comment section what you think on this, but let's just run this down. So he's promoted him from when he's turned professional. And I know the Anthony Joshua link's there. He's managed by 258. And obviously, so the links are obvious, but he's still promoted him from new, put him on some good, the next gen shows early on in his career, put him in some prime slots on there. And Eddie Hearn's backed him through some pretty shocking performances. I'm thinking the Isaac Chamberlain fight was painful at times. We also had the Matty Askin, wasn't it, at Wembley, which was like they got booed out the place.
Stunk the gaff out.
Well, they did, didn't they? He's guided him to a vacant world title shot without really fighting any of the superstars at cruiserweight. So, he's not. You couldn't get much of an easier run to a world title, in fairness.
And there's not many superstars in cruiserweight, to be fair.
Well, there's not, no, but there were tougher fights about than what Okolie's had, to be honest.
Yeah.
Even down to, Eddie Hearn, he made him a promise of buying him a 50 grand, the chocolate face Rolex Sky Dweller. He's done all that. He's main evented him headline shows. He's fought at Spurs, fought at Wembley, as we'd already said. So, and he's obviously been paid well. Anybody who follows Lawrence Okolie on social media, his lifestyle's there. I think we'd all be jealous of it. So, I mean, I don't know what you think, Ray, but that's the background of it. And I've got to be honest, I sympathise with Hearn and I'm not very happy with Lawrence Okolie. I think show a bit of gratitude and loyalty.
Well, I've just seen, there's a couple of comments I want to touch upon. I've just seen a good comment from Mickey C saying, you'll need to get that one up, Josh, if you can, saying that I don't think he'd be talked about if it wasn't for Hearn. I honestly don't rate him. I mean, Mickey C, I've known him for years, and he goes in. He doesn't pull his punches, pardon the pun. But, I do rate Okolie because I think once he hits you, you know about it. He's a bit like a cruiserweight Wilder. He'll finish people. Believe me, he'll finish people. And I want to see him hang around, but I completely see where he's coming from. If it wasn't, because he's so boring, and he's hopeless on the inside. He's like an octopus, really. He kind of Mickey's a big football fan. You won't get this, Josh, so I cover your ears. But he kind of reminds me of a footballer Newcastle used to have called Shola Amiobi. His balance was terrible, and this is what this is what Okolie is like in a boxing ring. He's just all over the place. But as a puncher, he's as clean as they come. And I do think that if it wasn't for Hearn being the machine that he was in the UK with Sky, we wouldn't know who Lawrence Okolie is. He would just be in oblivion. So I get that. I get that. I really don't see where Okolie's coming from. I think somebody's got in his ear. Somebody's obviously ill-advising him. I think he goes on to Sky. I don't think he becomes because people won't watch him on Sky. I don't think. So I think he's best off probably apologising to Eddie Hearn and staying on the zone.
Right, a few comments. So obviously Michael's come back with, I think if you thought he was any good, Hearn would have been getting him good paydays and fights. I don't think it's the end of the world if Hearn lost him. I don't think it's the end of the world if Hearn loses him, but firstly, he's clearly been getting good paydays. I mean, he's had a 50 grand watch outside of any fight. So I don't think the money's an issue. I think Okolie's possibly being greedy. But, in terms of how do I force the unification, well, you can only really unify if the champions want to unify. And that's the thing, Makabu's been tied up with talk of Canelo and whatnot. Bradis, he's just lost his title. So I don't really think anyone can be blamed. I think they've done as good a job as he can. Imran, I've sent you the link on Instagram, mate, so feel free to join us.
Yep.
Here we go. Yeah.
And a point that Davey made, boxing historian made earlier on about that Carl Froch reference when he was down against Jermaine Taylor when he knocked him out in the 12th round. I think it was 14 seconds left to go, if my memory serves me right. That's what I see also in Lee Wood, the fact that you can't count them out until the fight's over. That's what I was kind of alluding to when I said that. Davey, you bang on with that. Nicky C, I reckon Shola beats him. Probably.
You never know. You never know. But I mean, we'll see what Imran's got to say in a moment. But, I just don't see how he can be as ungrateful as he's been. And I don't really see, I understand what Eddie Hearn is sort of saying, with the Liam Smith loss, the Chris Billam Smith loss. He's saying in terms of, we're a global platform. We can only prioritise and spotlight so many people. If you're not in that, and you can earn more money, I'll tell you to go elsewhere. And I think, as a promoter, we should put some respect on his name for that, because it would be quite easy for him to just hog everybody and just not deliver for fighters or not deliver what they really can.
He can't do that though, Josh, because he's trying to tap in the American market. What you have to see is, and I've said it before privately to you, and I've said it to other people like Imran and Mickey C and other people that have been who's prepared to put up with my rants on boxing. If he's catering for the American audience and he's putting on shows at British times, they're coming on in America at the bang in the middle of the day. The Americans aren't going to want to watch a fight in the middle of the day unless it's someone like Anthony Joshua. They're not going to want to watch Lawrence Okolie. Now, the other problem Lawrence Okolie has is the lack of talent in the cruiserweight division. We just saw Jai Opatai beat Bradis. And in my opinion, Bradis is still better than Okolie. I don't want people telling me, Bradis looked past it in that fight. No, Jai put up a hell of a fight. But so did Bradis. The both of them had fractured jaws from that fight. I still think Bradis has got enough experience to cause Lawrence Okolie problems. Lawrence Okolie isn't the standout performer in the cruiserweight division. He's probably the standout puncher. But we're seeing with Deontay Wilder, that doesn't make you the standout performer. And that's the difference.
We say that with Okolie, though. And firstly, Joel, great comment. And I thought this myself. Yeah. I'd love to see what, because AJ's in his lifetime or, career-length promotional deal with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom.
Yeah.
Clearly, whenever you see them, they clearly think a lot of each other. He's mates with Okolie. I would be interested to know. I mean, I suppose everyone's got to look after themselves. But, just in relation to what you just said then, Ray, I think, Okolie, yes, he's a good puncher. But for every big knockout performance, there's a scrappy performance. I mean, look at his last fight in February. That was a tough 12 rounds to watch, if we're totally honest. That was a labour of love for us as fans. Oh, here he is. Imran, welcome, mate. How are you?
How's it going, Ray? How's it going, John?
Yeah, we're good, man. We're good.
Just before you get into your rant, Imran, I just want to touch on, oh, sorry, wrong comment. There you go, Ray. boxing story. And Davey's up for one of your rants.
Yeah. At least I've got someone to rant to. But yeah, it's all good. It's all good fun.
And then, yeah, Michael, who do you think is a good fighter that Okolie's faced? He has had some.
We should ask Imran that question because clearly Imran's got a point to tell us about Okolie. But Imran, what do you think of Okolie's career so far, and what do you think is in his mind for him to come out and behave the way he has done?
I think it's a disgrace. To be honest with you, first, Ray, you know, we have chats all the time, me and you.
Yeah.
And firstly, I've not taken to Okolie in the sense his style is very boring. I've told you that he's not the most exciting fighter, and he's actually probably getting paid more than his market value and what he brings, to be honest with you. But the thing is, Ray, firstly, we know I'm an ethnic minority, you're an ethnic minority. To compare to say Eddie Hearn is a slave trade, do these people know what people went through back in the day? To compare a millionaire lifestyle, right? He's a multi-millionaire. Eddie Hearn has changed. This guy used to work in McDonald's.
Yeah, true.
And he's out a multi-millionaire where he's a famous guy. He's not a superstar by any stretch, but he's still famous and well-known. He's on TV. You're comparing that to slave trade. Like, I'm sorry. It's a disgrace. I understand that boxing is a hard sport, and it's a sport where, you know, promoters at time can, you know, they can suck the life out of fighters. I get all of that, but this is a guy that is getting paid more than what he brings in terms of market value, right? His fights are not very exciting. Let's be honest. This fight, I've seen a lot of his fights. His Chamberlain fight was absolutely disgusting. And even the Ngannou fight that he had with the other the European, was it the European cruiserweight champion? Yeah. That was terrible as well. Now, the only reason it's not as bad because he knocks the guy out because he has got power. But prior to that, this guy is terrible to watch. So for him to come out with those kind of comments about Eddie Hearn, who, let's be honest, business people want to make money, right? They don't care about what color somebody is. They want to make money, right? That's their aim. They want to make money. And for me, Lawrence Okolie, from where he started and where he is now, I think he should be thankful to Hearn, because I don't think he would be in this position if he was with any other promoter, to be honest with you. I think it's Eddie Hearn's leverage that he has with Sky. That's the reason why Okolie's got to where he's got to. And to compare it to what people suffered back 100 years ago is an absolute disgrace. I think people don't understand what people of the past went through. And I think to compare something like this when you're a multi-million, let's be real, he's a multi-million. This is a guy that Eddie Hearn bought a 50 grand watch. People don't earn that in a year. They don't earn that in a year. And he bought him a 50 grand watch. Yeah. So comparing that to something that happened 100 years ago where people went through what they went through is a disgrace. Right. And we should call it out how it is, because like it's embarrassing. I think I get what Don King and did that to what they did to Mike Tyson and stuff, ripping him off. But again, Don King also said that when I had people like Muhammad Ali, they had nothing, and when they left me, they were multi-millionaires. So,
but that's the sign of a good promoter, though, isn't it, Imran? Somebody that can turn around somebody who's bang average and make them into something. But we've had a couple of interesting comments, Imran. I want to get your opinion of them. We've had Jackman saying, they're bad tweets when they end up getting deleted, which has got to be true. It's got to be true. But also, Mickey C picks up a really interesting point saying, let's just say about if he does go to Boxer, if he is on Sky. Yeah. And don't forget, more people are subscribed to Sky than there are with DAZN. What would that do for their viewers if they have to put up with boring Lawrence Okolie? Mickey C saying he would worry for them. I kind of agree. Do you?
I don't think it has much. Is Lawrence Okolie a big driver in terms of viewership? No. I don't think he is. I don't really think he is. Now, Eddie Hearn said they're talking about making him the face of BOXXER. They've got Josh Taylor there. Why would they make Lawrence Okolie the face? I don't quite understand that. I don't get it.
Well, this is the thing, Eddie Hearn talked about, and he had a little, not a rant, but, he had a few choice words about Lawrence Okolie. And like you said, his phrase was, I've done my absolute conkers on more than one of his shows, obviously in terms of, he's lost a lot of money promoting Lawrence Okolie, but he's done it because he believed the end goal would sort of justify the means. He'll get it back in the long term. But I totally agree with you. He goes over to Sky. The only thing I can think of for Sky and BOXXER, because let's be real about this. Barney Francis, Adam Smith, they know at Sky, they know what sort of gates, what sort of viewership Lawrence Okolie drives. Because although Lawrence Okolie's been quite lucky in what shows he's fought on in terms of attracting viewers, when he has headlined, the shows haven't done very well. So the only reason I can really think that they would write, let's get Lawrence Okolie in, is the fact that it makes the Riakporhe fight easy to make. Is it just a bullshit thing to get Okolie in, get the Riakporhe Okolie fight made, and try and because Riakporhe, they have built him well. It just makes no sense. That is bizarre, but it's the only thing in my head that makes sense to it all.
I saw a tweet from Lawrence Okolie saying that, how do I force a unification? I don't understand why there would be difficulties making a unification fight. They were talking about him fighting Bradis. Bradis just lost to Jaya. So I don't know what the issue is. Makabu, I don't know what's he been doing. He's been inactive. I don't know what Makabu.
I'm not too sure if he's injured. Because that would be for the WBC, wouldn't it? WBC and the WBO.
It's all a bit up in the air, isn't it? With Makabu, he was going to fight Canelo, then that's obviously fell through. So, I think the thing is, and like Eddie Hearn sort of alluded to, the fact that when they tried to fight Braid, they wanted another unification pre-Bradis. Everybody wanted too much money. Makabu was off to Canelo. Then when they tried, let's not forget, Bradis was on the commentary team, wasn't he, or punditry team for Okolie's last fight. That was with a view to making that fight then for the summer. Then if Eddie Hearn's telling the whole truth, which obviously we know he doesn't always do, but basically Bradis, they'd shook hands and agreed a purse. Bradis then kept moving the goalposts, and then obviously this fight in Australia came off and he went off there to go and make loads more money, which obviously, as we now know, he'll have made the money, but he's lost his belt. So
speaking of money, this comment's got me in stitches.
I was laughing.
I feel robbed when I watch Lawrence Okolie. I don't even pay to watch his fights.
It's time, Michael. You'll never get that time back. And as we've all just said, you think Matty Askin, you think Isaac Chamberlain, the European title fight as well against Ngannou.
Yeah,
waste of time for all of us.
I think us three gents were all in agreement that Lawrence Okolie's fortunate and should just stay put. I think we should say that with Lawrence. But
depends how much money he's being offered, though, Ray. Hey, if he's being offered something stupid, like I'm talking big money, then you can't really turn it down as well. It depends on what he's being offered.
You can't, but I'm not too sure Sky's budget would. I mean, we're saying Sky, it could be anybody else, but it's a lot of money to put on somebody who isn't going to guarantee you that money back straight away.
Well, apparently, Ray, Sky have been pumping a lot of money recently. They've just won the rights of the AJ Usyk fight. We don't know if they're talking about making him the face of BOXXER. That could be ridiculous. Like, we don't know. That could be ridiculous money. I don't know.
It could, but I say Eddie Hearn says, okay, good luck. Because I'm not too sure if he's that good. To take away his power, what else does he have?
The thing is, though, for Okolie, and likewise for Hearn, the same point applies. Matchroom in zone, we'll get onto this on our last topic in a minute, but they've lost a few fighters. So if you're Okolie, you might have been offered a ton more money, but one thing Eddie Hearn's possibly short of at the minute is headline acts. Okolie is arguably a headline act. He's a world champion with he's a big performance away from being a genuine headline act. A big performance against the right guy, he becomes that. Whereas, you go over and join Sky, as you so rightly said, Imran, Josh Taylor, Chris Eubank Jr. is a headline act. For me, Liam Smith is a headline act. Yeah. They've got Shields and Marshall. We all know what's happening there. That's a great fight coming. What he thinks he'll gain from going to Sky, for me, it's exactly the same position he's in now. But at least now, you're on AJ's team with Matchroom and DAZN, particularly now with his broadcast deal. And as you said again, so rightly said, Imran, I'm not feeling sorry for him on the pay front. I'm sorry, but he's clearly been overpaid so far, and now he's being like a fucking spoiled brat about it. I mean, just some great comments here. Eddie Hearn is a master at making fighters believe he loves and cares about him. his growing relationship with Jake Paul says it all. I'd agree with that to a point, but that face-off that they did, he did slag off Jake Paul's boxing ability.
Oh,
but,
he called him average.
Yeah, and Jake
that was
Paul,
being polite. That was being polite. Jake Paul is not average.
But I do agree. He does seem to bring a fighter in, treat him like family, and then sort of out to the curb when it suits him. Jagman's back. Jagman, thanks for joining us again. Yeah, that fight was truly horrific. I don't know about you, Ray. I think this leads us nicely on to our last topic of the night, doesn't it? Which, Imran, if you want to stay for this, you're more than welcome to, mate. And that last topic, can BOXXER take over the UK market? Guys, in the comment section, let us know what you think on this. Ray, I'll hand it over to you. What? Talk us through it.
Yes, can BOXXER take over the UK market? It's an interesting one. I think my opinion is Eddie Hearn's kind of left that void now. He's got his finger in far too many pies. He's overstretching Matchroom. He's covering European shows. He's wanting to tackle America, and he's not too sure how to do that. Tackling America is a big problem. One of the things I talked about is the time difference. You're putting on a show in the UK, broadcasting it in America. You're not putting a show on in America, you're putting it in the UK, but you broadcast it in America. So it comes on at a time in America which isn't suitable for the American audience because it's bang in the middle of the day. That's problem one. Problem two is America being America the way they are, they don't know that many British fighters, and when they do know them, they think they're all terrible. So he's not making as much crossover fights as what I thought he would. When he had Matchroom USA, that didn't do too good. But one of the reasons it didn't do too good was he was too slow at matching the likes of Ray Ford with equivalent British fighters. So he had Ray Ford, he had Sims Jr., he had a lot of these American talents, but he was just putting them on undercards in the UK against nobodies. He wasn't building them up properly. And incidentally, he wasn't making many crossover or many. When I mean crossover, I mean fights between these American stars and the equivalent of the British stars that would capture the imagination on both sides of the pond. I think he missed a trick there. So I think there is a gap for the likes of Sky, Frank Warren. If he really pulled his finger out, I mean, I can touch upon it now. The BT card isn't looking too bad for a Frank Warren show. You've got Mark Heffron, Lennox Clark. You've got Dennis McCann. You've got Nick Ball, who's looking quite decent down at super bantamweight. You've also got Hamza Shariz, who had that controversial win against Bradley Skeet. He's coming back out. So it's not looking bad for a Frank Warren show. And also you've got, I mentioned Pro Bellum, who have mainly got Northeast fighters. But they're going to branch out. They've signed some top American talent. They need to get Regis Prograis out there. So at the top and bottom of it, I think there is a gap in the market. And I think Sky, if they play their cards right, can be the main leader in the UK.
Just an interesting comment here. I get what you're saying here about, Fury, Warren. Obviously, they've got that sort of mutual thing. And in fairness, with the help of Top Rank, they backed him for the white purse bids. But I think, in terms of this bidding for the networks thing, they sold the rights to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia then have took the most money. So I don't think that's an Eddie Hearn thing. I think that's a DAZN thing,
Yeah.
And the rumors are true about $28 million. They've talked about 700,000 buys through Usyk AJ1, which was out to, I think it was 17.5 million, give or take a little bit. So, potentially Sky are prepared to take a loss to land the rights to that fight. I mean, Imran, what do you think on all this? Can BOXXER take over?
Yeah, I think there's a great opportunity for BOXXER and BT. Guys, you know what? I actually think, I don't know what you guys think. I actually think DAZN has been a disaster. I'm going to be brutally honest. I love DAZN. I actually got DAZN. I paid it monthly.
Hey, man, say that again. People didn't hear that. I
think DAZN has been a disaster. Like, I'll be brutally honest. Like, in terms of not in terms of not in terms of watching DAZN. Like, I love watching. But in terms of like their business, I don't quite understand what they're doing. In the sense that, firstly, there's no promotion. There's no promotion. Nobody knows about that Kubrat Pulev and Derek Chisora fought. only the hardcore boxing fans know. So there's no real promotion.
Yeah.
Sky, there's nothing promoting it. Then secondly,
Mm-hmm.
their decision making is absurd. Like, you've just signed Anthony Joshua on a huge deal, and then you lose the rights to Sky. It's like Usyk is a massive favorite going to that fight against Anthony Joshua. Chances are Usyk's going to win. So you're not even going to benefit from the fact that AJ is fighting Usyk. You're not even going to benefit from that rematch. Sky are benefiting from that. And then you're probably going to get a fighter that's probably going to lose to Usyk. And then you're going to get a depreciated commodity. I don't understand. I genuinely don't. I don't understand their business. I don't understand their business. It's like they're doing things out of desperation. It's bizarre. You know, they bought Canelo. They gave him a £350 million contract, and then that fell apart after a couple of fights. It's literally like it's been desperation after. Like, there's no business plan. There's no.
I agree with you, man. I think they're just throwing money.
Yeah.
I think they're throwing money. They're thinking, okay, let's just spend. There's no brain behind it. I think they backed Eddie Hearn, probably rightly, but I don't even think Eddie Hearn's clued up as to what we think he is. Because I think Eddie Hearn nailed the UK market, but he's struggling in the US, Mexico, which is primarily DAZN's biggest market. He's struggling.
There's some good comments in here, and then I've got just a little point. So Joel, Sky's got the viewing numbers. You're absolutely right. In that platform, I think that's
Joel, bang on.
That's what Eddie Hearn is missing. And again, Jagman back in the comments. You know, again, totally right. The Sky roster it's come on leaps and bounds this last few months, and then there we go. I think the issue is, and I'd agree with both of you. You know, when DAZN gave Canelo that big contract, I think, Canelo pushed for it to be terminated because he thought he could make more money per individual fight. Yeah. And I think the fact that he still worked with DAZN a lot sort of tells you everything you need to know. Canelo's just thought, hang on, I want to milk every last pound of it, and he obviously now is. But again, possibly you're right, DAZN desperate because they're still letting him do it. But in terms of how everything else has gone, and with what you said there, Ray, about Eddie Hearn perhaps not being as clued up as we think, for me, I personally think DAZN is 2 or 3 years ahead of the curve. I think they backed heavily. The initial deal was $1 billion, wasn't it? They put a lot of resources into fight fans being sick of paying for pay-per-views. And I think they thought that, I don't think they banked on how much purses would inflate when they were being aggressive in the market. We heard about like Tommy Coyle fighting Chris Algieri for $1.5 million. And obviously it's great for fighters because their purses rocketed. So, we've seen a lot more fighters finish their careers with not enough money so they don't have to work again, which I am a fan of and I'm here for it. But we're still seeing the pay-per-view model in the US. DAZN have been shut out. I think Eddie Hearn's possibly guilty of being too much of a gobshite in terms of, his little beef with Arum at times, his beef with Leonard Ellaby more recently, Richard Schaefer, all these people he's sort of offended, hasn't he? And what they've basically done in PBC is shut him out. So those big fights that would have made him crack the American market in particular, for me, he's not been able to make them. And that's where it's then gone wrong. But the actual idea on paper, as you said, Imran, yourself, I agree with you. I'm a big fan of what DAZN are offering, and for $7.99 or whatever it is in the UK now, that's a lot of fight nights for the money. Even if it crept up a bit more, if we were getting more fights, I'm all for it. But
we're not, though. That's the thing.
That's the issue this year in the UK market. The quantity of fights has gone down. The quality of cards has gone down. Sky are now coming in and nabbing fighters away that were making solid cards.
Yeah.
And, me and you spoke about it off camera, Ray, didn't we, on the weekend?
Yeah.
What Eddie Hearn and DAZN are now really lacking are those, your first, second, third, or possibly fourth fight, depending on how
that's the big thing, Josh.
Yeah. Go on, Ray.
That's a big thing, and you've hit that. I just want to jump on the piggyback on that point, because now it looks as though Eddie Hearn's got those really good prospects coming through who need time to develop. And I talk about 10 being a magic number because that's when you get to see him in more meaningful fights. And you've got those world title ready fighters who have either got world championship belts or are pretty much contenders in a duel in the next 1 or 2 bouts. but he has a massive gap in between. Take away women's boxing, I think he's head and shoulders above everybody else in terms of women's boxing. Then you've got Top Rank, but I think there's a massive gap in between his world title champions and his prospects, and that's where he's going to struggle with. And I think if you had played his cards properly in the US market, he would have captured that if he made the right fights. He now looks to start signing. I mean, the next question for me is, how does he address that? And I don't know what you guys think. We'll come to Imran in a sec. I think he needs to start rectifying that by signing these guys. So signing the likes of Adrian Broner, look, I'm not saying he's a 4-division world champion, what have you, but he's the type of guy that he needs to get in these fights with UK fighters in order to build that appeal over in the States. A Terence Crawford, free agent like Terence Crawford. These are the type of fighters that he needs in his stable. Regis Prograis would have been a good signing for him because he can build that back up to get that shot at Josh Taylor. These are the type of American fighters he needs to be signing to build that. And he started to do it with the Mexicans, and he did put on a good show. I have to hold my hands up, but that was over in the States where he had Bam Bam Rodriguez on. He had all those fighters on. That was a few weeks back, but he needs more of those, and we're not seeing that. We're not getting our foot by now. The Zone will be getting almost like fight camps 2-3 times a month, really, and then one massive card. But we're just not. We're not getting that. So I've got a question: am I getting my money's worth? Because for that $7.99, although it's short change for us, there's a lot of people it's not. And you got to remember, we're also paying for BT cards. Some of us, allegedly, not Mickey C. We're paying for Sky cards. We're paying for obviously Probellum, and that's free. You got Channel 5, and that's free. But there's a lot of outgoings for the fans. We've got a lot of choice now, which is great, but it does hit us in the pocket when you got fork out for all these pay-per-views, or even if you watch them on your streams. There's a lot, and you just got to think, I want to see quality as well as quantity.
Got some good comments here. Boxing historian: I can't see DAZN staying at $7.99 for much longer. Must be losing a fortune with DAZN subscription getting fights that would normally be on Sky Box Office. Is that a fair comment, Imran?
Yeah. I think DAZN are probably going to raise their prices.
Yeah,
honest,
I agree.
I agree with you guys. DAZN haven't really put on any in the UK, especially. What's the biggest fight that they've put on? I don't quite know this. It's like, what's the biggest fight that they've done? Is there any fight that they've done that was even bigger than Khan and Brook?
See, I suppose it depends. It depends what you want, doesn't it? I mean, there's been some good shows for me. I think back to when it started. I think it started well as the transition. Fight Camp was good. Led into Headingley, which had the Warrington-Lara rematch, which I was excited about that. You also had Katie Taylor and Conor Benn on the undercards, amongst some other fights. I thought that was a great show. Well, I know the main event wasn't exactly what we wanted, but you can't blame anybody for that. Another one that sticks out, I thought Chisora Parker 2. That was a good card. Lerone Richards IBO world title fight, Jack Cullen European title fight. I was impressed with that card. And then the start of this year, I think we spoke about this on last week's live, didn't we? A bit, Ray. When they announced Imran, they announced their first quarter's worth of shows. Yeah. I was impressed with that. Kiko Martinez, Warrington, Conlon Wood. There was a few, wasn't there? Conor Benn was out. I was impressed with that. For me, where it's gone up, maybe off a cliff edge sounds harsh, but for me, from this Q2, it's just gone. We're down to a show a month.
It's because they needed a fight camp this summer. They needed a fight camp 100%. To get those other fighters out. Where I think they've been really strong is at the women's boxing. I know what Davey's hinting at there, but I can't see it on camera. I get a slap and a fine. But the women's boxing have been really strong on, and a number of they have had a number of fights of the year for the women's boxing. I'll be honest, they've led the way there. But I know where Imran's coming from, and I'm not just saying that because he's there. I was expecting when I signed up to DAZN, maybe because I'm tight, but I was expecting great cards at least twice a month. That's what I was expecting, because that's what was sold to us, don't forget. That was the whole point of Eddie. Eddie said, I'll get a bigger budget. You've seen what I could do with Sky. Now imagine what I can do with a bigger budget. Those were his words. And has he delivered so far? No, not in my
Guys,
opinion.
the other thing is, Ray, Josh, you know, the fights that Josh just mentioned there, all of those fights were good fights. Some of them, Lee Wood and Conlon, was a great fight.
Yeah.
These are all trade fights, guys. These are all fights that aren't really going to move the needle in terms of we're hardcore boxing fans, so we're going to see those fights.
Yeah.
I'm talking about that big super, so like your AJ Usyk type fights. Now, there isn't many fights like that out there, but that's what DAZN needs from a business point of view in order to move the needle and get to that next level. And I don't think they've delivered those type of fights. And if they don't deliver those type of fights, guys, DAZN is going to go under. You can't keep pumping all that money.
I agree.
You need a big fight. The fights that they've been doing are trade fights for us guys, the hardcores that watch every boxing fight. But the only way you're going to grow as a business if you can attract the casuals, and you only get the casuals with the big fights.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've seen a comment from Davey as well, and Mickey C talking about crossovers with the YouTube stars. I think there's possible a reliance on that as well.
Well, they've got KSI's card, haven't they, coming up shortly?
Yeah, they have.
But I think. Sorry, Ray, we spoke about this before, though. I think that's great for that weekend or that month because the subscribers hit. But although I think that's actually their first pay-per-view, isn't it, globally, you know, in terms of the UK as well. But those subscribers don't stay. I mean, I think Mickey C commented on Boxing Storm, you know, the comment was about the KSI Logan Paul fight where Billy Joe Saunders was defending his world title on the undercard. And, you know, that's a very short-term viewer because they don't stay. I think that's the problem. You know, and this is a great comment. Canelo would definitely need box office. Bivol on DAZN, that would have been Sky box office, so is what he means. And yes, it would have been. But is it fair to say, Imran and Ray, both of you really, that the biggest mistake DAZN have made was the fact that when they launched, it was the game changes forever. And also, like, you know, pay-per-view is dead. Now, I totally understand now with where the finances in boxing is, that the likes of a Canelo and Anthony Joshua, a Tyson Fury, you know, these fighters, to get the money that they want and get, you have to have a pay-per-view model. I think that's fair to say. Do you guys agree?
I think if you want to attract and maintain and keep the biggest and best talent out there, arguably you're going to have to, because that's how boxing historically is run. It's going to be very, very difficult to change that. You need to throw a lot of money and sustain that. DAZN have thrown a lot of money, but I can't see them keeping this up. I really do worry for them financially, and I think I know where Ayman's coming from. I think they'll go under pretty quickly because I don't see them having that kind of. If we can think of the big fights out there, a lot of these guys aren't with DAZN. A lot of these guys are with Top Rank, or a lot of these guys are with Al Heyman and PBC. The type of fights that need to be made. You know, I mean, look at the lightweight division. I mean, he hasn't even got any of those lightweights.
No.
So this is what I'm saying, really, and I think the heavyweight division fight, Usyk's more than likely going to beat Joshua. I know you've got a different opinion, Josh. We'll come on to you in August, but right now, what I'll say is, Usyk, should he beat Fury, that fight isn't going to be on DAZN either. The biggest fight in women's boxing isn't going to be on DAZN because Shields and Marshall, that's on Sky. So
no, Ray, we had the biggest fight in women's boxing in April, Taylor Serrano.
Well, I mean, we're talking about a two-time undisputed. A lot of people are sleeping on Clarissa Shields. So, but my point is, financially, those big, huge fights, you just don't. They're nowhere about on DAZN. So I do worry for them. And it's not as if I'm hearing rumors that they're in talks to sign these. You know, for me, I was expecting the likes of Tank when Tank was talking about Lee and Mayweather. He was flirting with DAZN. They had that banter with Leonard Ellaby, or went horribly wrong. He needs to be with DAZN. They need those type of signings. They need like a Terence Crawford. He needs to be capturing this type of talent. in order to make those fights that people think, wow, that's a massive fight.
Josh, you know the Savannah Marshall and Clarissa Shields fight? Although I respect Katie Taylor and Amanda Serrano was a great fight, and it's great that women are now getting good exposure in boxing. The thing is with that fight, the Marshall and Shields one, I think that is a bigger fight because the reason why I think that's a bigger fight is because there's a lot of tension there. There's an American black female fighting and a British thing. That sells really well, and they both don't like each other, and they're bigger, they're stronger. There's a possibility of a knockout as well. Where with more generally at the smaller weight classes, the knockouts don't come. Even though Serrano had Katie Taylor, shaking in the fifth round, was it? Where you thought, whoa, she might
fifth round, yeah,
her out. But generally in the higher weight classes, there's more of a chance of a knockout as well. So I do think that this fight, I'm quite surprised it wasn't on pay-per-view. They could have done it maybe for 10 quid or something. But to be fair play to them, they didn't do it, and I think it's I'm really looking at first time in my life I've been excited for a woman's fight. Like, I mean, really excited. Like, not like I watched the Serrano Taylor one as well, but I'm saying I'm buzzing 2 months before. I've never had that kind of feeling for a female fight ever. And I think
I was buzzing for the Taylor Serrano fight on the basis that I thought Serrano would do a really good job on Katie Taylor. I was worried that Katie Taylor was starting to get a bit old. She was taking too many punches. She was slowing down. She wasn't as quick, wasn't throwing as many. But I do like this Shields Marshall fight because it has shades of the Wilder Fury fight. Although Marshall's a better boxer than what Wilder is, I still think that if she lands clean, you don't know, that could be in the Shields in that fight. I still think Shields brings a lot of skill, plus she's a great talker, Clarissa Shields, and you've got an old amateur pedigree, the rivalry that they had from the amateur days. Even though Clarissa Shields was far better than more accomplished amateur, she lost to Marshall. People forget she was only 17. You didn't see that in the Taylor and the Serrano fight. There wasn't that build-up. But going back, I guess where Iman's going back to my point about the zone, and we're talking about all that, is Sky have built that fight properly. They built it well. They got the two of them in the ring after the fight. You saw them shouting at each other. You've seen Savannah Marshall saying she's falling asleep at Clarissa Shields' fight. I've never seen her more awake in my life. But anyway, that's what she's saying. So it's really, really interesting to be built up. Again, the zone, the promotion of fights isn't very good. You know, if I'm away on holiday, and as you guys know, I don't take my phone, I'm not aware of who's fighting on the zone because I'm not seeing it on billboards, I'm not seeing it on posters, I'm not seeing it on when I switch on the TV, nothing. But you can't miss a big fight that's going to be on Sky because it's everywhere.
Yeah, but
and this makes a difference.
See, I don't necessarily think that's the zone's fault though. Sky've just got that platform. And, time, Sky's been one of the biggest things for, 30 years plus now, more than my lifetime. And I know what you're saying, but I just think, in terms of the women's boxing, boxing story in here, he's only recently started women's boxing. Obviously, as you chaps will know.
Davey, yeah. Mm.
And I get what you're saying there, Davey. I do. But I just think that's, and, as we've all admitted, Eddie Hearn and Matchroom, head and shoulders above the rest for women's boxing on the whole. And the fact that how much it's grown in the last 5-6 years, for me, testament to that's probably the one big success story in fairness. And I know Sky were involved as well when Eddie Hearn was with them, but they have continued that women's boxing thing. Now most cards have at least one women's fight on there, which, BT don't even do women's boxing really. You never hear of it. I know they had Nicola Adams before she retired, but I just think you've got to give credit where credit's due, I think. And I'm not saying DAZN and Matchroom have done everything right. They obviously haven't. But I do think on this sort of front, they have done that right. The women's boxing element, that promotion for Taylor Serrano, for anyone who's watched this channel long term since it started, I've been calling for that fight since before we even started doing the channel.
Yeah.
So the fact that we got it and the way they built it, in the fight week before, they were on every American, every British news outlet. Eddie Hearn and Jake Paul, in fairness, they put an absolute shift in promoting that fight. the women did a great job as well, and then obviously the fight delivered. And I think what with Shields and Marshall, I think it's been built well so far. But I do just think, and it's a risk what they're doing as well with this all women's card, because I think that's where they then had to say, I agree with what you're saying, Imran, it probably should have been a pay-per-view. But going an all women's card can't go pay-per-view. And I'm not being sexy saying that. I enjoy women's boxing. The 2-minute rounds bring drama. But to do a good, successful pay-per-view to pay these fighters what they want, you need to attract the casual viewer, as we've just said tonight. An all-women's card, we'd all order it, or allegedly, but you wouldn't, your casual Joe Bloggs in the pub, he isn't ordering that card. So I think they've done the right thing, and they've made a big statement for women's boxing, haven't they? Because as we've all said, fair play. They've backed the fighters, they've backed Ben Shalom to free up the finances to put that fight, which is one of the biggest fights in not just women's boxing, all of boxing.
In the whole of boxing, yeah.
Yeah, and they've backed it to be on, not free to wear because you have to pay for Sky, but you're not paying extra for it, and I'm loving that.
I think Josh hit the nail on the head there when he said that the casual boxing fan isn't going to buy a female pay-per-view. Unfortunately, as harsh as that sounds, it's the truth. The casuals aren't going to buy it, and most importantly, the other thing is, there's a fight on the undercard, Alicia Baumgardner v. Michaela Mayer, which
on
its own. So that card, I mean, those two fights, they're massive. Like, to get them two on the same card, wow! I'm not just looking forward to the main event. I'm looking forward because they've got beef as well.
Yeah, they have, and that's what you see. Because when Alicia Baumgardner absolutely ironed out Terry Harper.
Yeah.
Now, for me, Eddie Hearn should have jumped on that. He had Alicia, kept her on, but then he's allowed this fight to go on to Sky. This is the other thing. He was having a little tournament at the light welterweight division when he had Chantal Cameron, and it was called Road to Undisputed. Now, what's happening with that? Do you see what I mean?
Injuries, isn't it? That of I can't remember.
It's injuries, but they can be rescheduled. I mean, we saw with the Super 6, the Super 8s World Series of Boxing, when they had injuries, they still allowed those fighters to take place. We saw George Groves, he was injured, wasn't he, when he fought in the final against Callum Smith? That fight, it did get delayed. He was recovering, but it still went ahead. You get these guys in some sort of tournament, you allow it to be extended to the fact that when they do have injuries, it still goes ahead. I mean, if he's serious about taking over the world, as the zone says, you can't let these opportunities slip to your competitors.
I was going to say, I think as well, and you have to acknowledge where it's gone wrong. Again, he promoted this Road to Undisputed tournament, but then it sort of died a death, and really there's only people like us, hardcore people who read all about boxing or watch everything, that you actually know why it slipped by. To a casual that heard about it, they just think, what the hell? But I think that's one thing I would say Eddie Hearn's guilty of. Sometimes, he only promotes, and he's a great self-promoter. We know that. I think, and that's another mistake the Zone have made. They literally bet $1 billion initially, and who knows how much since, on Eddie Hearn being able to replace the Sky platform, getting himself on the internet. And I respect it. He's fantastic at it, but it's obviously just not worked. Just before we carry on, guys, it's a great point from Davey there. 16 people watching in. Get your comments in, guys. Also, hit that like button. If you haven't, hit the subscribe button as well. It does help us out. Also, Imran's helping us out massively tonight, guys. Imran Mur TV. If you haven't checked that channel out, make sure you do, because as you're seeing tonight, Imran's a great guy and seriously knowledgeable on his boxing.
Absolutely.
Share the live as well. Share the live. Share this live to your friends and stuff, so then they get to know it. And also smash the like button. It helps these guys out with the algorithm.
Thank you very much. Davey comes at us again saying Tyson Fury wants to fight AJ for free. It was free on telly. I mean, I've laughed and joked about this with Davey. We talked about Tyson Fury and his throwaway comments. But I was listening to something on the radio about 16 months maybe a year ago, talking about the Joshua Fury fight, if it was going to happen, why it doesn't happen on terrestrial TV. For me, that would be a great sacrifice, and I would think it's worth it if you sacrifice the pay-per-view money to make a once in a lifetime historic event, an all British affair for the undisputed heavyweight title at Wembley. Get 90,000 there because you can't get 100,000. That for me is well worth it for the memory books. That's a type of fight that we should be having, but the chances of it happening are very slim because Joshua, as I found out, has got a mammoth task ahead of him. Mammoth task. But should he get through Usyk, that fight's got to be made. And my worry is, we're talking about the zone. Does it land on the zone? Probably not. I'm not confident at that stage, but then again, I'm not confident that Joshua does the job on Usyk. Not as confident as I was last year.
That fight's got to be made, yeah. But, you know, as Davies put it, so right. You know, Fury's running around the stage. And we know Fury, again, great self-promoter, great talker, running around the stage, all fighting for free. It's free to air telly, free to get you, you know, into the stadium, 90,000 at Wembley. But then in the next...
He backs it up in the ring, though. He backs it up in the ring. That's one.
No, he does back it up, Ray. But then he also says, "Oh, I'm retired. Oh, I want, you know, as Davies put it, $500 million to come back and all that."
Rubbish.
And I'm not being funny, but that fight will be made if Joshua beats Usyk, which I know I'm more confident than most. But if he beats Usyk, that fight will be made. They signed for it once, obviously, in the whole arbitration thing. We won't go over old ground, but you've got to look at the facts. They're not going to do it for free. Anthony Joshua now, I think it's fair to say he cares more about being a businessman or cares about as being a businessman as much as boxing.
Yeah.
Tyson Fury, you know, I'll fight anybody, but it's always the money's got to be right. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Eddie Hearn openly says in most interviews he loves a pound note. Frank Warren will want the payday. The network, it just won't happen for free. I love the sentiment from Fury, and I'm a Fury fan, but stop talking shit because you're not going to sign up. If Anthony Joshua put a contract in front of him saying, "You're right, bang on, sign that, we'll fight for free," which would never happen, Tyson Fury would have an absolute heart attack. And, you know, Mickey C, he's back yet. No, Joshua wouldn't sign, but none of them would. Is that right, Imran?
Yeah, he's getting banged out for nothing. That's true. Joshua will get banged out for nothing. You wouldn't want that.
Fury is the most contradictory, or I haven't seen anyone contradict himself as much as Tyson Fury. Like 2 weeks ago he just said, "I want 500 million to fight." Now he's saying, "I'll fight for free." He does that all the time. He literally, I don't know whether he tries to, you know, annoy us or he does it on purpose to get under our skins, or I don't know. Fury just loves to have fun with the public. I think he's a great fighter, but I do think sometimes some of his shenanigans outside the ring, like stuff like this, I don't really understand Tyson Fury, to be honest. Like, as great a fighter he is, I think at times, I don't know whether he's got a couple of screw looses or he's just intentionally saying this stuff. But I rate Fury. I do really rate Fury, but I don't think he's gonna ever fight for free. No fighter's gonna ever fight.
No chance. Just before we go, man, and Josh, just before we go, it got put to me by a very, very good friend of ours, Imran, Davey Fulton, about a fight that I've also heard is pretty much as good as done. I just want to quickly get your thoughts on who you think would win this fight if it is done. Like I think, and my good source tells me, Davey Fulton, the boxing historian, tells us it's going to be done. And I'm talking about Chris Eubank Jr. against Conor Benn. Should that fight be made, like it's been mooted to be made, and like I said, I've got it on good authority from David, it's going to be pretty much made. Who have you got winning that fight, just quickly, and why?
You asking me, Ray?
Yeah, I'll go for you then, Josh.
I think it's a mismatch. It's a welterweight fight and a middleweight. They'll do it at a catch weight or whatever. But yeah, if Chris Eubank is at his best, or Chris Eubank, obviously he's able to walk and, you know, move in the ring. He's not dehydrated to the point where he can't tie his shoelaces. Then I think obviously he'll win the fight because he's just so much bigger. Conor Benn's not even a big welterweight, let alone fighting big middleweight. You know, Chris Eubanks fought at 168. You know, so it's a mismatch. It's a joke. It's just making money.
Yeah. Josh, just to end it, how do you see it going?
Totally agree with Imran. I think, you know, it all depends on the catch weight. Same as what we said about with Eubank Jr. fighting Liam Smith. It all depends on what the exact weight is because, as Imran said, Conor Benn's not a big welterweight. So, you know, say it gets made in the middle at 154. He's not big at 154. Can Eubank make 154? He did a stretch at 168, as Imran said. I agree with Davey. It's a pointless fight. They're at separate stages of their career. And I don't get why Eddie Hearn, and, you know, he's been slagged off for trying to protect Conor Benn, putting him in with these old ex-world champions. Why would you then, after building him to 20-0 or whatever he is now, why would you then throw him in a mismatch, as Imran said, and potentially risk him getting knocked out or lose badly? And, you know, the cash cow you've been building realistically to replace Joshua, as Joshua's aging and potentially on his way out of making the big money, why would you risk it for that? I mean, Ray, what do you think on it? I suppose is a fair question.
Yeah, I think I can't disagree with what you guys are saying. It's not even if you can do the whole Kell Brook thing with Golovkin. Oh, yeah, he lost, but he lost to Golovkin. Golovkin's an absolute monster, and no one would fight him. Kell Brook's brave. He stepped up to the plate, and he still got his world title. You don't have that with Conor Benn. Conor Benn loses, and he loses in a bad fashion, in my opinion. I think he gets bullied, and I think he gets taken out of there. I really do. I think he gets absolutely battered in there. And I think it's going to be very, very hard to rebuild Conor Benn. I think it's a case of, and I'll say this very quickly, there's too many killers in the welterweight division. You've got Ennis, you've got Ortiz, just to name a few. You still got the likes of Thurman that would do a job on him. You've got Spence, you've got Crawford, and he's not going to put him in any of those. So he gets him in a fight with somebody out that weight class. Then he rebuilds him back in the welterweight division, still avoiding those killers because you've just seen him get obliterated by a middleweight. And by the time he rebuilds, those top elite welterweights have moved on, gone up a weight class or retired. And the likes of Boots Ennis and Virgil Ortiz are too far ahead of Conor Benn. I think that's his sinking.
See, I'd agree with Mickey C. Like, while I think the weight depends, I'd probably pick Chris Eubank Jr., but I can see a case for Conor Benn winning it in terms of, you know, youth, relentlessness. You know, we have seen him develop a lot, and he will be probably more hungry. But again, it is just a money spinner. And this comment's made me laugh. My dad can beat your dad. It's like a playground fight. I think that's a great one to finish on, isn't it, Ray?
Yeah, pretty much. So that one's got me. That's what got me tickled. That one. Yeah, that's pretty much what our fight is. My dad's better than your dad.
There we go. Right, Imran, thanks ever so much for joining us, mate. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
It was great coming out. Great. Thanks for having me on, guys. I really enjoyed it.
Anytime. And thanks to everybody that's taking the time to jump on and give us comments and give us their thoughts, and hit that like button, guys, and the subscribe button as well.
Brilliant, guys. We'll be back next week with another live. We'll confirm on our social medias. So at Between the Ropes TV, check that out and give those a follow as well. Cheers, guys.